Just what will Andy Burnham do? That's the only question, really, that's been asked for the entire week. And starting on Monday is when most people started to think to themselves, what will the MP for Makerfield, Andy Burnham, be doing when he storms number 10 in just a few weeks? And that's because no other Labour MP has decided they want to have a go at trying to be Prime Minister. It all started on Monday when one of our reporters, Steph, went up to Manchester to listen to Andy Burnham's first big speech since he won Makerfield. Now, she was joined by quite a few other journalists who piled onto trains up to Manchester, only to be told they weren't being allowed to ask any questions and they had to go and sit at the back of the room and listen to him talk. He announced number 10 North, which is, as you can imagine, number 10, but in the north. Weirdly enough, it's going to be in Manchester, where Andy Burnham used to be the mayor, and he explained that it would be a sort of a conduit through which his plans to bring the north of England closer to government would flow through. He didn't tell anyone how much it would cost or give any specifics on Monday, and we weren't allowed to ask any questions. But all of that was quite rapidly overshadowed come Tuesday when the Defence Investment Plan, that's the Westminster speak, for the amount of money being given to the armed forces to make sure that the military is ready to fight the wars of tomorrow rather than the wars of 10 to 20 years ago. However, that was already coming with quite a few problems. Not only was it about 14 billion quid short of what military chiefs had been asking for, it turned out pretty rapidly that there was a £5 billion black hole in it. Namely because Rachel Reeves and Keir hadn't actually said how they were going to pay for 5 of the 10 billion that they had announced. 10 billion, we were told on Tuesday, was going to come from efficiency savings across government, and the remaining 5 billion, well, that was on the next Prime Minister to find in his budget. It's like a £5 billion welcoming gift for the next Prime Minister, which the Tories weren't overly impressed about. James Cartledge, he's the guy who looks after defence on the opposition benches, the Conservatives, was not happy. He told the Daily Express that it was too little, too late, and then went on to tell us that it wasn't even worth the paper it was written on. But it wasn't all bad news for everybody on Tuesday. Nigel Farage had some great news and declared that he had made £270,000 in commission for flogging gold bullion online and on the telly. Heading into Wednesday, and we started the day with some slightly strange news, and that's that a Welsh Assembly member was demanding that people needed extra training if they had pet rabbits. I'm not making that up, no. That is a Welsh Assembly member who basically thought that you needed additional training in order to have a domesticated rabbit in your house or garden. Oddly enough, just a few days later, opponents of that plan called it harebrained, which I thought was quite funny, but is probably not accurate because hares and rabbits are, of course, a different species. Heading into PMQs, and there was a sense of frustration from Kemi Badenoch, who spent most of the time asking that question, what does Andy Burnham think? Keir Starmer, who's probably figuring out what he's going to do once he leaves number 10, wasn't overly keen on answering that question and instead spent the time having a go at the Tories. But all of the questions were about this defence investment plan. Constant questioning as to where the money was coming from and why there wasn't enough of it. The Tories went on the offensive again, blasting too little, too late, and saying that they'd have done a much better job. Of course, Labour were quite keen to point out that defence spending did go down under the Conservatives, but the Tories said that they wouldn't do it if they were in charge, and that they would take an axe to the welfare bill to pay to keep our country safe.
Mr. Speaker, the Chief of Defence Staff is an honourable man, and what he and the NATO Secretary-General have done is welcome the fact that a plan has been published. Just that it's been published. They've been waiting for over a year. Strategic Defence Review was last year. He is an honourable man, Mr. Speaker, who is having to make do with very little. The threat level has dramatically changed in the 2 years that the Prime Minister has been in office. Poland, since the Prime Minister took office, Poland has increased their funding to 4.8%. Germany has increased theirs to 3.7%. This year, Russia will spend 10% of GDP on defence. Meanwhile, Britain is spending it all on welfare. Even the limited plan that he has announced has completely unravelled because he hasn't found the money to pay for it. It is £5 billion short. We all know that he is leaving this mess to his successor. So can he confirm that the member for Makerfield has agreed to fund the shortfall?
Heading into Thursday, and Keir Starmer's headache got a little bit worse when it emerged that that £10 billion efficiency saving that we were all told about on Tuesday, he didn't actually know where it was coming from. When repeatedly asked by journalists, how are you going to pay for these efficiency savings, Keir, his spokesman, basically didn't know the answer. So £10 billion, no idea where the efficiency savings are coming from, and £5 billion that's Andy Burnham's problem for when he gets in. It was all a bit of a mess, and the news just sort of got worse. On Thursday, the notorious grooming gang leader was released from prison. But there were immediate demands to get the guy deported because he was born in Pakistan. We didn't know if that was possible, and we found out that he's basically being stopped from being deported because of a 55-year-old law, the Immigration Act 1971, which protects Commonwealth citizens from being kicked out of the country. That wasn't seen as a good enough answer. Labour MPs said they wanted him out. Andy Burnham, the next Prime Minister, said he wanted him out. And surprisingly, so did the Tories and Reform. But we were repeatedly told this might not be possible because we couldn't change the law at the stroke of a pen and kick him out. But then it turned out we probably can change laws, but just not that one. When it came out later on in the day that we can extend pub opening times for the England match on Monday, when pubs normally have to close early, Keir Starmer personally intervened, he's a big footy fan, and said they can stay open till 5 a.m, which is great fun if you're going to the pub, not particularly great fun if you live near one. And then by the end of the week, we were still left asking the same questions as we were at the beginning of the week. What would Andy Burnham do? But we got some answers on Thursday evening when Andy Burnham kind of broke cover, ran to a radio studio and gave an interview to one Andrew Marr. He revealed that there was some room for putting up taxes on businesses, but would stick to the Labour manifesto commitment not to put up national insurance, income tax or VAT. Conservatives I spoke to did point out the fact that Rachel Reeves did put up national insurance when she put up national insurance contributions, and if you're a farmer, you probably would say that she put up taxes in other areas as well. She's also dragged pensioners into income tax for the first time for many of them. Andy Burnham also revealed that he hasn't decided who his Chancellor would be, which is probably disappointing news for Ed Miliband, who is widely touted and rumoured to be the man lined up for the job. But there's no decision yet. The Tories, again, not particularly happy and said that we were being condemned to a summer of indecision and chaos if we didn't know what Mr Burnham was doing. And that's because if Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, it could take place on the 20th of July, we immediately go into what's called a recess. That's when Parliament doesn't sit and MPs are meant to go back to their constituencies. However, it does mean that the new Prime Minister won't be able to be scrutinised by members of Parliament, and we sort of just have to wait to see what he wants to announce and do. So having gone into the week, unsure what Andy Burnham would do on defence, on taxation, or who his cabinet will be, we've come out of the week knowing that he doesn't know what he'd do on defence to pay for the black hole in that budget. We don't know who he's going to put in his cabinet, and we think there's a bit of wiggle room on tax. What that means, we don't know. We'll have to wait now until next week to see what we can learn, because I imagine this question is going to stick with us. What will Andy Burnham do?